Welcome to Murder Mimosas.
I'm Shannon.
And I'm Danica.
Are you looking for a unique twist on your true crime podcast? Join us on Murder and Mimosas, where a dynamic mom and daughter duo delve into chilling crime stories while sipping mimosas.
Each Saturday, we mix our favorite brunch drink and dive into some of the most intriguing true crime cases. Our casual yet captivating conversations blend our southern sarcasm with fresh perspective.
So pour yourself a mimosas, get cozy, and tune in as we uncover the darker side of humanity together.
Dark Cast Network. Out of the shadows comes the best in indie podcasts. I'm Jen of our True Crime Podcast, and you're listening to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+.
Hey, that's it. No disclaimer this episode. Just, hey. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to a new week and a new episode of Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host along the coast, CJ. I hope you are all doing well, Warriors. And for those who might be struggling a little extra this week, here's a virtual hug from me to you. Squeeze! Did you feel it? I have learned my puppy Jack is a stunt dog. He's fearless. Well, kind of. We went on a hike with the kids and their German Shepherd and Black Lab probably about a week and a half ago to this remote area that ended at a little beach cove that had a ton of big rocks. Now, I am not the sturdiest on rocks, and I went to another area where I could start crossing over the big rocks just to get to a little larger beach. Jack stayed with the kids and the other dogs. Soon I looked back at all of them, and I see that Jack was following my daughter's boyfriend up a huge mountain of a rock. Jack seems to get a little worried. He stops, he looks down, and he starts to cry. Then all of a sudden, he starts coming down off the rock. He gets about halfway down and he dives into the ocean. I was so lucky he was okay and didn't smash his head on a rock coming down. So, yeah, Jack does his own stunts. Ooh, I hope to see some of you at the upcoming True Crime Fest Northwest at the end of the month in Portland, Oregon. And if you want to go, type in Rainbow 10 at checkout. You'll receive 10% off your ticket price. Also, if you swing by my table and say, Rainbow 10 to me, I'll give you a free t-shirt just for showing up to the event and for being a listener. I'll leave the link to the event in my show notes. Before I get into the main case, I would like to share something that I read not too long ago about the recent passing of talk show legend Phil Donahue. Now, I remember Phil Donahue as a kid. My mom used to watch the Phil Donahue Show. I believe it was on after General Hospital or Days of Our Lives or one of the soap operas. I used to kind of like Phil Donahue because he was married to Marlo Thomas, who is a Lebanese woman and actress that played in a show called That Girl. Well, apparently Phil was super supportive of the LGBTQ+ community. And that's a fact I never knew. Of course, as a kid, that wouldn't have made a difference to me either way. But as an adult lesbian and advocate of the LGBTQ+ community, I think Phil Donahue was a pretty awesome dude. He was also the very first television host to tackle the taboo subject of AIDS and HIV in the 80s. It was a time where everyone believed all gay people had AIDS. Phil's human compassion for the gay victims of HIV, he would talk to about the heinous disease and brought the topic to the forefront, and then without hesitation he would hug these folks. Most people of that time wouldn't touch a gay person for fear that they would contract AIDS or the HIV virus, doctors included. Nobody wanted to talk about the disease, let alone be in the same room as someone who was infected with it. But Phil, he not only talked about it using his television platform, he also fostered empathy from the public towards the LGBTQ+ community. Phil also talked about gay parenting. This was something that horrified the public, so he invited gay parents on his show, and he humanized them. He showed that they were real people. I just really wanted to give Phil Donahue a shout out and a thank you for being brave enough to bring tough topics that involve the LGBTQ community to the front burner, and for challenging anti-LGBTQ naysayers. Rest in power, Phil. Our main case is a fairly new case from April of 2023. Unfortunately, that means there's no resolution to it so far. Someone has been arrested for the crime, and then they were released and then arrested again, but they've not had their day in court yet. And for supposedly being such a high-profile case, I have to be honest, I've never heard about it before. And then all of a sudden, I'm receiving email notices about it. I think that's because the killer was just recently arrested again. Okay, with that, let's get into it. On a quiet street in the historic neighborhood of Boston Edison in Detroit, Michigan, lived a handsome, wealthy, gay 53-year-old neurosurgeon named Devon Hoover. Dr. Devon's home was a mansion and must be worth well over $1 million. I did a little digging in his neighborhood, and while there are several homes in the million and above category, this area has also some very affordable homes under $500,000, and they're good-size homes, too. It truly amazes me how the housing market is so different in different areas of the United States. I mean, what got me this little house I live in on the coast of Oregon could buy me a huge home in Detroit, Michigan, but I'm just not so sure I want to live there, so I guess I'll keep my little home for now. Many who knew Dr. Devon considered him to be sweet and a kind man. He was a friend to many. He was warm and gentle with a generous spirit. In spite being a talented and well-to-do neurosurgeon for 20 years, Dr. Devon didn't put on airs or act like he was better than anyone else. He was well loved by his friends, neighbors, family, co-workers, and his patients. Every Saturday, Dr. Devon would stop by a local farmer's market, and he would purchase a beautiful bouquet of flowers to take home with him. And in his neighborhood, he was known for being an expert hedge trimmer, even turning down social engagements with friends just to stay at home and trim his hedges. Friends threatened to burn his hedges if Devon didn't start going out and doing more things with them. Dr. Devon purchased his beautiful 9-bedroom mansion in 2008. After acquiring his home, he developed a passion for shopping for antiques and art pieces that caught his eye to fill his residence. He would often invite his neighbors over for a glass of wine to share his decor every time something new came into his possession. Neighbors said he had a real flair for decorating. Unfortunately, last year, 2023, on April 23rd, Dr. Devon's life would come crashing down and end violently in his beloved mansion that he lived in all alone. Dr. Devon's naked body was discovered shoved into his third-floor attic, a crawl space, really. His body had been wrapped in a sheet and had a comforter and a rug laid over it. Then the body was lodged into the crawl space. Police who showed up to conduct a welfare check on the doctor, they were the ones to find his body. Dr. Devon had been shot multiple times in his head. The community, upon learning of Devon's murder, were reeling in disbelief. Who could have done such a thing to their beloved doctor, their friend, their neighbor? The reason police were called for a welfare check was because Devon was supposed to make a trip to Indiana. He was supposed to go that weekend to see his dying mother, and he didn't show, and no one in his family could contact him by phone. His family members had called the Detroit police and requested a welfare check, Devon's car, a white Range Rover, was also missing from his home, along with his cell phone, his wallet, his credit cards, his cash, and 2 designer watches that were worth thousands of dollars each. Devon's car was found abandoned days later across town. A fingerprint dusting and blood was found inside the Range Rover. This gave police a viable suspect lead. That, along with pings on Devon's phone, led police to the suspect's home. And soon they had 34-year-old Desmond Burks in custody. Desmond, well, I want to say he was pretty much a loser. Desmond already had a long list of crimes he had committed prior, including a felony road rage murder hit-and-run back in May of 2023. Although the police didn't realize that at first. They didn't realize Desmond was the culprit of that crime. He was originally arrested for the murder of Dr. Devon, and then he was released. At this time, police still did not realize Desmond was the one behind the road rage incident where 67-year-old Retta Sala had bumped into the back of Desmond's car. Both men had gotten out of their vehicle and an argument ensued. Then Desmond punched Retta, causing the older man to fall to the asphalt and hit his head. In spite of the valiant attempts by paramedics to rush Retta to the hospital, he would die the following day of head trauma. But who is this Desmond Burks dude besides having a criminal past? And what was his connection to the doctor? Good question. Desmond appears to have been a lover to Dr. Devon, a paid lover. It wasn't until the start of this month, August of 2024, that Desmond was again arrested and charged with Dr. Devon's murder. Oh, and the hit-and-run road rage murder of Retta in May of 2023. While the doctor was saving lives, sometimes even for free with no cost to a patient who couldn't afford it, Desmond was off taking lives. I think that's taking opposites attract a little too far. A very good friend of Devon's named Megan said that she spent a lot of time around Devon and in his home. She had met Desmond on a number of occasions. There was no question in her mind that Desmond had killed her friend. She described Desmond as a low-life dirtbag and a leech. But Devon chose to see the best in everyone, and all the warnings about Desmond from his friends, they fell on deaf ears. With Desmond currently now behind bars, his bond has been set at $1 million, and he's awaiting a competency hearing. In Dr. Devon's case, Desmond is being charged with first-degree meditated murder, grand larceny of over $20,000, and 3 counts of felony firearm possession and usage. If Desmond is found competent enough to stand trial, I sure hope the death penalty is on the table. Although it most likely won't matter, as Michigan is a state that's abolished the death penalty. Rest in power, Dr. Devon. Our True Crime Quickie this episode comes to us from Florida in January of 2017. This is a True Crime Quickie that I've wanted to cover for some time now. But the story's really bothered me since I came across it, and I was never quite certain as to why. But I think I might have figured the reason out, aside from it being a murder of an LGBTQ+ member, of course. I'll share why it's been bothering me when I get to that part. 53-year-old William Denham Jr. was a petite-framed gay man. He was sweet and kind and really liked to help people. He lived with his boyfriend Dan Kane in the Seminole Heights area of Tampa, Florida. William had just walked to the grocery store from his home on January 14th. He did his shopping, and then he had grocery bags in his arms as he started to walk home. Suddenly, William was jumped by 3 people in daylight on a residential street. Now remember, William was a small guy, and the element of surprise was not in his favor. The attackers started to punch and kick William. One of the attackers called him a pedophile during the beating. And when William was pummeled and laying on the sidewalk unable to move, the 3 attackers vanished. However, one of the perpetrators was recognized by a witness to the situation. That attacker was 26-year-old Jaden Shanae Zeters. She was someone who lived nearby in the neighborhood. 2 men were with Jaden that day as well. After his attackers left, William's groceries were strewn everywhere. His wallet was missing, and he was bloodied down his front from being pummeled. He was now unconscious and barely clinging to life. By the time emergency responders arrived, William had lost his fight and he was dead. The medical examiner noted his cause of death was blunt force trauma to his face and head. While investigating William's murder, police canvassed the area that the crime had occurred at, and they came across quite a few witnesses, including that witness who recognized the woman involved. In no time at all, police were knocking at Jaden's door. She at first claimed to know nothing about William's beating, and then she claimed that the man who was beaten had broken into her garden area of her home, and he sat there watching her while he masturbated. She said she told her boyfriend about it, and he and the other friend beat the man up to defend her. And when her boyfriend and the other man approached William verbally, William lashed out at him. The men then lashed back at William, so it was all done in self-defense. And then suddenly, now get this, a big black man jumped out of the bushes and delivered the final blows and kicks to William. And then the big black man disappeared when he heard the ambulance siren. Because we all know it's all big black men's jobs to hide out in bushes and jump out when white men and women are beating a gay man in daylight on a residential street. So if you're a big black man out there, why aren't you hiding in a bush waiting to pounce and deliver the death blow to someone? What a bullshit lying piece of work this woman Jaden is. No witnesses saw any big black man at the scene either. She's the reason why this case has really bothered me and why I've been hesitant to cover it. William was gay. Breaking into your garden to look at your crazy bitch face while he sexually gratified himself was not going to happen. Your face, your body, everything about you, Jaden, is an aphrodisiac, not an aphrodisiac. Nothing about you would have been remotely sexually attractive to William. Hell, I'm a lesbian and I don't find anything attractive about you either. Jaden had a prior record for being busted with heroin. No real big shockers there, I'm afraid. She apparently had just pointed William out at random to her boyfriend and his buddy as this horrible man who masturbated in front of her. And she did this to try to distract them from an affair she was having with someone else. Oh my God, can this woman be any worse? Well, yes, she can. She's registered with the Republican Party and a Trump supporter. Stephen Mitchell was Jaden's boyfriend at the time, but I can't seem to track down a name for the other man who was their accomplice. Stephen pleaded guilty to manslaughter and he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Jaden pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received 12 years of incarceration. It would seem tragedy struck again at the home William had shared with his boyfriend, 66-year-old Dan Kane. This happened in September of last year, 2023. Dan was now sharing his home with 3 other people. A massive fire broke out within the home and it burned the house down. The 3 people Dan shared the home with, they made it out of the home before it was engulfed in flames. Dan, however, didn't. He is now with William again across the Rainbow Bridge. Police are looking at the fire as suspicious, and one of the people who made it out of the home is being looked at as a suspect. Rest in power, William and Dan. I love you, Rainbow Warriors. You matter. I might not have an episode for you next week because with the True Crime Fest Northwest in Portland, I just don't know that I'm going to have the time to put one together. But I got you the following week with a listener suggested what the fuck episode coming up. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.